Hey guys, this is Eve. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to exploring various topics of the metaphysics and looking at them from a very occult standpoint. I tell people that my videos are for a very small fraction of the world's population. They're referred to in the Bible as the 144,000. So if you're an RH negative, you're 15% or less of the world's population. If you're a black RH negative, you're 4% or less, okay? I really want to focus on a particular soul that's approached me lately, okay? And it's a very interesting time, for this soul to approach me. And this soul, I've actually communicated with this soul in the astral plane, kind of like sparingly. I really haven't really spoken to him very much, but he has actually come through a lot, okay, a lot. And so I was pleased to meet his acquaintance, and I really want to just disseminate the information that he has given me upon the astral plane. And so it really causes me to kind of like do some introspection and to look at my Lilith and Libra placement, okay? And so everyone knows that, who follows my channel, that I'm very versed in astrology, okay? A lot of people, they discredit astrology, but especially like religious people. But if you look at the Bible, you look at how it's coded, it's replete with astrology. That's how they found Jesus, the star, the wise men. It tells you that astrology is wise, okay? So this is how they find Jesus, King Herod, which represents the government. So everything in the Bible is allegorical, whatnot. But yeah, we're targeted by the government through our natal chart placements. That's why in the movie End of Days, right, when they find the Christ child, my back itches. When they find the Christ child, they found her according to the stars, right, when she was born. So they always log your birthday, your time of birth, and so that's actually logged in Rome. So you get a birth certificate, okay? And so really, when this soul approached me or whatnot, it really had a lot to say in terms of his relationship, okay, with his current partner. The thing is that some souls, they contract with me because of my Lilith and Libra placement, okay? Lilith is the perverted aspect of your personality, okay? And so this world teaches you not to be perverted, to be good. All right, but the world is here to quote unquote kill you, right? To kill Christ. That's the whole purpose of it, for judgment, okay? So Christ's energy doesn't just represent your ego and the good aspect of you, but it also represents the devil, or the veil of your ego, which is your subconscious mind. And so the subconscious is created via the constructs of the matrix, okay? So like when you watch television, right? How many times does the bad guy win? Let's look at your movies, look at your television shows, whatever the case is. Your programming is for you to be good. And so when they're suppressing that, and you're suppressing your nature, you're really bad in the subconscious. And so you really die to filth and disgustingness. And they purposely get an energetic kick off of seeing you suffer as you ascend to this perverted aspect of your personality. So the powers that be, Rome, right? How they love the blood of Jesus, right? And so when you're like performing rituals like communion, where you're drinking the blood of someone and you're eating the body of Christ, that's a vampire, that's vampiric. And so they actually get an energetic kick off of seeing you fight yourself during ascension, because you're trying to integrate the so-called good aspect of yourself with the bad aspect of yourself that they themselves created. Okay, so one thing I've noticed, throughout my spiritual journey is that, looking back at before the age of 7 and how, my mother created certain things within me, my familial structure, my education, whatever it is, people are blaming me, the ego, for what they themselves created, which is really sick and disgusting. But Rome is really sick and disgusting. Okay? But Lilith is considered to be the perverted aspect of my personality. I should say Lilith and Libra. So Libra is about beauty. It's about refinement. It's about justice. Not Lilith and Libra. Lilith is Libra itself. The sign of Libra is about beauty, refinement, justice, partnerships, marriage. It's the sign of marriage and that type of thing. And so with Lilith being there, I use all these attributes of Lilith in a quote-unquote perverted way, okay? So like, for example, like if you saw me like on a regular day, it's like, does that Eve, like she look like that? you know, because really I typically only get dressed up when I'm doing a spell work, when I'm doing spell work, when I'm casting spells, okay, or when I am doing my spiritual work and that type of thing. So it's kind of odd, like getting ready for my video, whatever the case is, I really kind of felt like, you know, okay, you know, I used to appreciate beauty for just the aesthetics, right? Because I have my moon and my Venus in Libra. But Lilith is about using these things to destroy people's marriages and to, you know, wreak havoc and deal judgment and that type of thing. So there's an ugliness to beauty when it comes to Lilith, okay? Lilith and Libra. And also, you know, Libra is a sign that's an air sign, you know, so it's heavily, you know, based upon the intellect. And so my Lilith and Libra placement is very much about the intellect, but not really using the intellect for, you know, creating beautiful things, but for pretty much for degeneration, for degenerating things, for destroying things. And sometimes things have to be destroyed in order for you to have the benefit of something, okay? So just want to kind of get you in touch with the nature of Lilith and Libra, okay? You know, and it's about perverted justice. It's about not an eye for an eye, but it's an eye for both of your eyes. It's not a tooth for a tooth, but it's a tooth for all the teeth in your mouth. So it's not justice like Libra, but it's perverted justice, okay? And so I think that's very important to, you know, the backdrop of the channel involving this person that has, this soul that has approached me, okay? He's a very, how should I put it? He's very, very gentle. Very gentle. But I feel like the gentle nature or whatnot carries a very, I guess that you would say, oppressive type of energy. Okay? It's like for example, when I met my twin or whatnot, I met my twin. He actually was married. He was married, and you know, he said that he was trying to get out of his marriage, and I was getting divorced. And so, you know, at that point, my husband and I, we had an understanding that we wanted out of our marriages, and so we wanted to explore. And so, you know, sometimes marriage can be a very sticky thing, you know. But I took a chance, and I actually, you know, got into a relationship with this man, although he was married, okay? And I knew that he was married. And, you know, it was very interesting because when I first met him and we had our first date, he met me at a old establishment that had ties to the Freemasons, okay? So I did the research on the place where he took me, and so it was actually heavily versed in the occult, and the history was versed in the occult and the Freemasonry. And so when he, you know, when I was talking to him or what have you, you know, he sat right next to me, usually like on a date, like a person like sits across from you typically, but he sat next to me. So there's like, think of this like a table with 4 chairs, and so he sat, you know, closer, you know, to where I was. And so when my food came, you know, when our food came or whatever, he started cutting my food, okay, like a child would, like, you know, like you cut food or whatever and you feed the kid. So he started cutting my food, and I just said to myself, that's very interesting. You know what I mean? Like, why is he doing this? You know, but at the same time, it felt very endearing, okay? It felt very, like, you know, comforting, you know what I mean? That, you know, he would do something like that for me. However, there seemed to be like an insidious nature behind it, okay? And so I feel like this soul that's approaching me, he's very gentle, but I feel like his gentleness is very, very intoxicating in a way. It's a way of kind of like disarming people, you know? And so he has a certain way about him that really gets people to go along with his side of things and go along with his agenda and how he feels about things, okay? So he has a very beautiful soul, but very powerful at the same time. And so people usually associate beauty with weakness, or, you know, they associate, you know, gentleness and kindness with weakness. But he's gentle, but he's not weak, if that makes sense, okay? So he's gentle, but he uses this gentle aspect of himself to achieve his ends, okay? And to get what he wants. And so, you know, when he approached me or whatnot, you know, I started to see images or whatever from the movie Pretty Woman, okay? And so, you know, I've talked about this on my, you know, other channel, whatever the case is, in my videos, how, you know, certain souls like mine are considered prostitutes. We're sacral prostitutes, okay? And so we're used by the government, you know, to actually basically turn tricks, right? Because the thing is that, you know, my life or whatever, I, you know, spent my life being educated, building a career, whatever the case is. And so I can see, based upon how, you know, the government is, you know, purposely trying to destroy my work history and that type of thing, and make sure I have no money. It's like, well, when you don't have any money, what are you going to do but marry, and marry well, right? Marry well. And so that's sacred prostitution. That's pretty much turning a trick. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I'm like, well, I didn't bust my ass my entire existence to turn tricks or whatnot. But anyway, you know, this soul or whatnot really came to me in terms of, okay, you know, you have this Lilith and Libra placement or whatnot, this perversion of marriage or whatnot, and I want you to use that in terms of helping me with my particular relationship, okay? And so I was just like, okay. And so, you know, I just uploaded a photo, my profile photo of my ex-husband and I. So, you know, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been the wife, and then I've also played the mistress, okay? And so, you know, when you have both, like, knowledge of both, then you can make sound decisions and give people sound decisions according to, you know, what they want for their relationship and what they want for their marriage, okay? So like I said, this is the perverted side of the personality, and you may be triggered by it and say, oh, you're a home wrecker, whatever the case is, or this, that, and the other. But, you know, really, to be honest with you, as a psychic, and I'm a super duper psychic, I can see what you look like when you get into the ether and when you die. And many of you will die to a filthy, disgusting whore. So, you know, I really don't care about your judgments, you know. To me, you are a filthy rag to me anyway, to be honest with you. But anyway, I wanted to focus on how he, let me slow down just a little bit just to kind of get my bearings. I want to focus on this relationship that he has with this woman, because, you know, once I communicated with him about, you know, the whole pretty woman thing or whatnot, and how I thought that he had a very beautiful soul and this, that, and the other, his partner came up, and she came up very, very harsh, very territorial. You know, I was just kind of like, oh, hey, you know, this is the astral plane. This is not the physical, you know, plane, you know. And so, you know, the ego has a physical life, right? It has, in reality, it has a life where it has a partner and has a job and religion or whatever the case is, or, you know, whatever, you know. But the soul was very concerned with me speaking with him on the astral plane. So I was like, wow, he must be really great, you know what I mean, for her to actually approach me with such fierce, you know, like, really just, you know, like, stay away from my man, you know, like, type of thing. And so, you know, normally I really don't get that, to be honest with you. I really Catherine, you know, Prince William's, you know, wife, Catherine, she's really lately has been like the only person that's kind of like, was like, you know, back up off my man or whatever the case is. And I really wasn't even intentionally trying to do anything or trying to get anywhere with her man. But, you know, this woman actually was very fierce, like fierce warrior, like, this is my man. And I was like, okay. I was like, you know what? As soon as she turned her back, I'm going to try to see if I can get her man. Because I'm trying to figure out, like, why she like that. Like, I mean, like, what is he doing for her that, you know, she is that, emphatically like, I'm gonna kick your ass, like, type of thing. So, I'm not sure if he's married to this person or whatnot. I tried to do some research online to kind of figure out if he's married to her. If he's not married, I feel like it could be going in that direction in terms of marriage. But looking down the road, this marriage actually doesn't last. Yeah, it doesn't last. And I feel bad for saying that, but I feel like he wants this marriage to last. And so this is why he has come to me and trying to figure out, how to kind of strategically, fix things to where they're more in place. So I feel like this is a very, very cute couple. I feel like aesthetically they're very nice looking. I feel like his significant other, she's very beautiful. And I feel like she's, has a good confidence about herself. I just feel that she is very self-assured. You know what I mean? Despite being territorial, sometimes a lot of times when women are like, don't mess with my man, they don't have a strong sense of self. But I think she does. I think she does, or whatever. I feel like she's very protective of him. I feel like she is, someone that, definitely tries to mold someone to, to fit her agenda and how she wants, how she wants to live her life or whatnot. And she's very deliberate about that. You know what I mean? I feel like she's very communicative in terms of, what she wants, what she desires or whatnot. And I feel like this is the type of woman, maybe not directly, but indirectly, she can mold things and do things to where it takes the free will of the man, but she's like, she wants this person to do this or whatever to fit into her agenda, what she wants and what she desires, okay? And you're really walking a slippery slope when you do something like that, because people call me a witch and they say, oh, you're a Lilith and Libra person, you're a witch. Lilith is a demon. But this whole world is based in witchcraft. Like, if you go on a date with someone, you're gonna put on your best clothes, you're gonna put your makeup on and do your nails or whatever the case is. You're gonna do a lot of things to get the person to to sway their decision, where it's like, pick me. So you're not really, like Chris Rock said, like when you first meet someone, you're not really meeting them, you're meeting their representative, okay? And so as the relationship goes along, you start to meet the real person, and this is when you start to have problems, okay? And so I feel like she is the type of person that will display a certain thing, or she will do a certain thing to achieve a certain end, but that's very exhausting, okay? And so once the makeup is off, the hair is off, your nails are off, your clothes are off, it's like, oh, well, who are you, at your base level, okay? And so, I feel like, ultimately, I do feel like she's a great person, don't get me wrong, but I feel like there is this aspect of her that we as women, we all have, that, does things to sway a man, or does things to get a man to, want to do things for us, or to, to marry us, so whatever the case may be. Do you see what I'm saying? And so all women do that, and all people do that. This world is based upon witchcraft. That's why the pentagram, which is the 5-pointed star, is integral to all aspects of the matrix. The pentagram is what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. Okay? That really ultimately is what the pentagram is for, the sensual aspect of our existence, of our reality. Okay? And so when you get a sixth sense, then you start to see beyond that. But yeah, like if you went to, the In-N-Out Burger, right? And you want a burger and you see it like a picture of the burgers on the menu, right? Does that look like the burger that you get? It doesn't. And so because of that, that's witchcraft, showing somebody a glamour and then giving them something that it doesn't really measure up to what the glamour is, okay? So I feel like with this particular soul, that's very much the case here. I feel like there's a lot of glamour that's covering up aspects that need to be brought to the surface in his relationship from what he's telling me. Okay, and let me just say this, I'm not God or anything like that, like, people paint a picture, but he is giving me this information to give to the ego. Okay, so you can think of me just being a medium to deliver the information that he's telling me, but he's basically telling this shit to himself. Okay, so there's a lot of glamour. Okay, now the thing is that I feel like this relationship is very safe, very safe. I feel like they're very compatible in many ways. Right? I feel like this is a soulmate. I feel like this is a soulmate, very compatible. But the thing is that there can be too much compatibility when it comes to a relationship. Okay? And so I feel like, his relationship reaches a sort of stagnation at a certain point, right? Like, one thing I notice about this particular soul and being intertwined with him in the astral plane, he's very emotional. He's extremely emotional. I'm not exactly sure about the ego. I don't really know this person personally, but it seems like the ego is not as emotional as this astral body is. Okay, and so the emotions is represented by water. Okay, and so pretty much when it comes to relationships, it's water, is the emotions that links us to different people. And I feel like with this relationship, it's such a safe relationship, and they're so compatible. And they're so in tune with each other that the water, the emotions, eventually become stagnant. So you can think of a relationship, like their relationship is like a lake, right? So you have different bodies of water. You have lakes, you have rivers, you have streams, you have, ocean, seas, or whatnot. So in the ocean, it could be very treacherous, you know what I mean? Like you can have high seas or whatnot, and it could be lots of waves, and the river, doesn't stand still, so it's constantly moving. It's a river. You have ships coming into the river and stuff like that, just constant sways and that type of thing. If you're on the beach, there's waves coming in or whatever, but there's a lake, water pretty much stays stagnant within a lake. Okay? And so I feel like he and this woman, like when I'm talking to him, right, and he and I are like conversing on the astral plane, like he puts me with him at the edge of a lake. And so he said, look at this lake. And so he was like, this lake is my relationship. And so he's saying that eventually it becomes stagnant. It's not really going anywhere. And so he's like, but I feel like with his ego, like although he's in a very safe and secure situation, he's around people or knowing of people who are in oceans or seas, or who are in rivers, who have more of a chaotic type of relationship with their partner. And so I feel like in a very subconscious way, he actually, I wouldn't say envies that, but he wants that for himself. There's a type of, I wouldn't say jealousy per se, but I feel like there's an inclination to want to get out of the lake and into the river, into the sea, into the ocean. Okay? And so there's this stagnation. The stagnation is created by the fact that they're just so compatible. And so I feel like with this relationship that he has to be very deliberate, and he and this woman have to be very deliberate in shaking things up. But if they don't, then it could really like fuck up. Okay? This is the type of person where it's like, if he, like say if, he and this woman are married for a decade, and he just comes home one day and he's like, I don't love you anymore. And so she's just like, well, what the hell is that? Like, we just had a baby, we bought a house together, you just got a great job, I just got a great job, we just booked a vacation to Japan, whatever the case is. And so it's like everything is going great. And so she's trying to figure out from him, like, why the hell are you wanting a divorce? Like, it doesn't, like, that doesn't make any sense. But it's because of this subconscious aspect of himself that, really you could consider to be a demon. Okay? Because his astral body is very yin. Okay, usually when you think of yin, you think of the woman, right? The taking aspect, But his his archon, or what you would call astral body, right, or shadow aspect of himself, right, is very yin, very taking, very drawing, okay? And so, you know, I could never, well, I don't know, I can't say that, you know, like say if I was a prostitute and I was turning tricks, it would be very, very difficult to turn a trick for him because of the fact that, you know, the woman is there to turn the trick. You see what I'm saying? Like, the trick is not supposed to turn you. And so I feel like when it comes to his love making, when he's definitely feeling a woman, right, he can have a way of unleashing the emotional body during the sexual act to where it's taking something from the woman instead of, you know, giving. Usually masculine energy is giving and, you know, the woman is taking, so, you know, yin yang, but it's his way of being, right, and especially his love making, because a lot of times you can tell a lot from a soul based upon their love making. But I feel like his love making is very yin based. Okay. Let me slow down a little bit here because, you know, he's very his astral body is very what is it? It's very competent. I shouldn't say competent. What's the word? It's very forthright. You know, I don't really have to kind of like piece things together or whatnot. Sometimes it could come through very quickly and I can't catch up, like type of thing. So yeah, so I feel like, you know, they have a relationship where things become stagnant, and that he has to shake up the emotions because this archon, this demon, right, the subconscious aspect of himself is very emotional, and so he loses the emotions, and I feel like this could actually unfold into a blown out affair, actually. Yeah, I feel like he is susceptible to having an affair. And, you know, typically, like, you know, when men have affairs, like women, you know, we can kind of like, you know, I don't know, just dismiss certain transgressions, especially if it's like physical. It's like, oh, you know, she's really cute, and so you just wanted to get a nut off or whatever the case is, and so it's like, I know he loves me, you know, he's always gonna come home, okay, like Jacob, he always gonna come home, honey. Just playing. But anyway, you know, he's always gonna come home, you see. But this person, he has a demon, it's an archon, it's a subconscious aspect of himself that's very emotional, where he's the type of man where if he falls in love with a woman, right, his mistress, he's not coming home. He's not coming home to you. And if he's coming home to you, he's coming home to tell you that he's leaving you and that he's going to be with his mistress. Yeah. So he's not the type of person that really kind of like falls in love easily. And I feel like when he does fall in love, he falls in love very, very, very hard. Like very hard. And it's just too much, you know? Like when I'm actually like, you know, intimately engaged, because yes, like on the astral plane, you know, I can't intimately engage with souls in the astral plane, okay? Just like how you have like sex in the physical reality, you can have sex on the astral, you know, astral plane. You know, it's mental, but you still, a lot of times, like the astral body will give me an indication in terms of the way that it is and how it is based upon sexual exchange. Okay, that's his life force. Okay, so it's everyone got here through the sexual act. Nobody got here through the mind. You know, you got here through, you know, between the legs of your mom and your dad. Okay, and so this represents life force, and so sometimes souls will emulate that, you know, or they will mimic, not, is that the right word? They will mimic that, right, to give me some information in terms of, you know, the information concerning the soul and how the soul, you know, really is, how it, you know, the characteristics of it. And so very, very emotional, very passionate, very kind, very gentle, and just kind of like all encompassing, you know what I mean? So I feel like in Pretty Woman, like when Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, what was her name? Vivian, and his name was what is it? Edward. So Edward and Vivian, like they had that fight at the horse match, and so, you know, she packed up her shit and she was like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And so she was like, she wants her money. And so, you know, when he gives her the money and she leaves, she was like, you know what, I'm not going to take the money, I'm just going to leave. And so yeah, that's a very it was a very, I guess that you would say, memorable part of the movie. It's like, why would she do that? You know, because she was there to get the money. You see what I'm saying? That's why she's staying there with him. But really, the money didn't mean anything eventually, because she fell in love with him. And so it goes to show that it was the feeling, it was the emotions, that was the money. That's why, like, we keep our money in a bank, right? A lot of things are very, like, ship safety when it comes to the English language. A bank represents water, which is emotions. You see what I'm saying? And so, I feel like when it comes to this soul, he's very emotional. And so instead of like a prostitute trying to get money out of him, you know, and saying, okay, I'm going to use the money to, you know, get a few trips, a few bags, whatever the case is, you know, and just keep it moving, you know, it's like he's taking the money from the prostitute. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, he's taking something. So I feel like being intertwined with this person, if he reaches the deep subconscious in the sexual act, that he's taking something from you where you don't want the money. You see what I'm saying? And so that's, you know, it's very yin based. It's kind of like a succubus, right? Like, men are usually like, you know, men are male sex demons are called incubus, whereas a female sex demon is called a succubus. And so, like I talk about, like, Master Yeshua, whatever the case is. Like, Master Yeshua is an ancient Egyptian, and so if he reaches the deep subconscious in the sexual act, he's an incubus. So he's giving a lot of sexual energy to the woman and flooding her womb with a lot of, you know, like, emotions or whatever the case is, okay? But I feel like with this person, it's interesting because although he floods the womb with a lot of emotions, he's taking something away from the woman. You see what I'm saying? And so you kind of leave the sexual act with him in some type of, like, you know, like, what the hell is going on? You know what I mean? Like, this is not supposed to happen. You know what I mean? Like, you know, this was supposed to be fun, or it's supposed to be casual. You know, this is supposed to be, you know, an affair, like, strictly just, you know, something for fun, or a tryst, whatever the case is, where, no, like, I feel like this is some type of demon that, you know, makes the situation into something else. Like, you go in with an intention and you come out with a result that's like, you know, what the hell is this? You see what I'm saying? And so it's very transformative. And so I feel like he has to be very careful if he does have an affair, that, you know, he could very much get caught up emotionally. So if he's not really conscious and cognizant of this information in terms of himself, then he can really get fucked up, you know. But really, when it comes to marriage itself, marriage is doomed to fail. That's why everybody's married. Like, they're either, you know, upset, or, you know, they're pissed off, you know, they're not happy, or they're divorced. You know what I mean? And so marriage is really created by extraterrestrials, and it's destined to fail. That's why, like, when you see, like certain gods, you know, like Shakti and Shiva, right? You see Shiva gets married to Shakti, right, which is the feminine, right? But once he finds union with Shakti within himself, then he, you know, Shakti goes away, okay? And so really, our spouses really represent an aspect of ourselves that we're trying to integrate within ourselves or sustain, you know. But once we are highly anchored within that energy, then there's no use for the partner anymore. You see what I'm saying? So eventually, they know, the people who created the institution of marriage, they know that that's going to happen eventually. And so that's why you have to be intentional in terms of, you know, keeping things going or whatnot. But once you realize the energy through yourself, then it's like, well, why am I here? There's no reason. There's no purpose. You see what I'm saying? So, like, for example, you know, I always give the example that, you know, when it comes to Lilith and Libra really does not like the institution of marriage as it is. Okay? It's kind of like, what is it? I lost my train of thought. What is it? It's kind of like, you know, once you realize those things, it's like, what's the use? You know, what's the use? It's like if you marry somebody within 7 years, that's a different person. That's not the same person that you married. So, you know, every 7 years you have a new set of hair, a new set of nails, you know, a new set of skin. Physiologically, you're different. So if you're different physically, then you're going to be different psychologically and mentally. So technically, that's not the same person that you married. Okay? So I feel like, you know, he partnered with me in the astral plane in order to give some information concerning his relationship, because I have Lilith and Libra, and, you know, marriages are just doomed to fail. You know, it's like, I don't know, you know, in our society, you know, we have diversity. You're not going to stay at the same hotel every time you come to Vegas. You're not going to eat at the same restaurant every time you go to Vegas. You know, you're not going to wear the same clothes every time that you go to Vegas. So why are you fucking the same bitch every time you go to Vegas? You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, you know, these institutions or whatever are designed to not reflect the nature of a human being. Do you see what I'm saying? So I feel like they have to be very deliberate, very intentional in terms of, you know, destroying this so-called stagnation within their relationship, and to ruffle the waters in some type of way. You know what I mean? And so that will give them a new appreciation for one another. They don't have to have flat out affairs, but, you know, they could do things. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go out on a date with this person, but I want you to be at the restaurant when I'm on my date with her. And then I'm going to come back to the room and screw you, or something like that, you know? Because I feel like they're so in tune with one another that it does not provide any type of spark. Eventually the spark goes away, and the spark goes away in any relationship, any marriage, you know what I mean? But, you know, that's why it's you have to be very intentional in terms of sustaining that spark. And I think for him, more so than many people, other people, that's very important, and very important to establish what you would call an emotional bond with that person. You see what I'm saying? Like, you know, do something where that generates the emotions. And so it's a highly emotional activity to where you're bonded to that person. You know, like, say for example, if you go skydiving with that person, you know, you don't die, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're together, we didn't die, we love each other, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you know, I feel like they have to go on those types of, you know, excursions and things like that in order to be bonded together. You see what I'm saying? So there's a real high priority as it pertains to bonding and losing that bond, and the fact that he has this desperate need, subconsciously, to be connected to the emotions. And when he's not, he reaches a stagnation that may have him go outside of the marriage and not just go get like a whore to turn his tricks, to turn tricks or whatever, but to actually get a full-fledged relationship that could lead to ending his marriage. I know. But he's very, very kind. I feel like he really, like, his ego really loves this woman. And, the astral body, I feel, wants, great things for him or whatnot. But it wants him to be aware of, the potentials or what have you and what could happen. I feel like if he does have an affair with this woman, or an affair on this woman, he has to be very careful, because I feel like she's very intuitive. And so whenever you have, a woman knows, like, she feels like when her man is, like, fucking her a different way, or, like, he's supposed to be, where he's supposed to be and he's not. You know what I mean? Like, she's, we're very intuitive. But I feel like we can actually, as the man, you can kind of channel the intuition in a way that works for you. I feel like if he does have a mistress, the mistress doesn't need to be somebody that has no connection to his girlfriend or his wife. Okay? It's like, I feel like this woman, if he's fucking another woman, like, she needs to be in the fold. Like, she needs to be the accountant. She needs to be the, the counselor, the doctor, whatever. So he has a reason for seeing this woman. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not very suspecting, you see. So because I feel like his partner is very intuitive, and so she's going to want to, she has a feeling, okay, something's not right here, And so I feel like, you know, being like, oh, you know what, we're gonna double date or something, and the person that he's double dating with is the woman, is his mistress, is the one that he's sleeping with. Okay, and so his wife would never suspect that he's sleeping with, some mutual friend's, girlfriend or wife. Do you see what I'm saying? A friend or whatnot. So I mean, a lot of times, like, like when I'm talking about Lilith and Libra and cheating and stuff like that, people pass judgment and they're like, oh, that's bad. You know what I mean? Like, you're telling him to cheat or whatever the case is. No. But what I'm saying is that, the institution of marriage itself is about destroying your soul. It's about destroying your will, destroying your desire, destroying your nature. And so when it comes to that, you have to be true to yourself, or you have to be true to your soul. But you have to balance that with your ego, right? And, because we all have to live in the physical world and in the world. And so Christ is always killed in the world. You see what I'm saying? Is always mocked because you're supposed to be good. You're not supposed to be bad. And so you have to say to yourself, well, everybody's good. And, we have, good people with cancer and good people, who have their marriages fucked up and people cheat on them. It's like, well, there must be something wrong when it comes to this goodness aspect of things. You see what I'm saying? And so I feel like, if he and his partner don't have an understanding that he will have to go and get his needs met elsewhere, and that if he does that, he has to be very strategic and he has to be very careful in terms of how he does it. And so I feel like, instead of having a mistress that's across town or in another country, whatever the case is, I feel like that mistress needs to be close to him and needs to be close to the family. So that person is not very suspecting. Do you see what I'm saying? A business partner, if they're not a business partner, she's in business, try to create some type of business relationship with that person. So, it will be unsuspecting. Okay. And I do feel that because, he's very emotional, the subconscious is, I don't feel like he would attract a mistress that's going to try to hurt his relationship. I feel like he would attract somebody that's trying to help him and to keep his, soul fulfilled. You know what I mean? I don't think that this is a person who wants, to take over or get married or whatever the case is. You know what I mean? Like, this is somebody that, wants good things for him. And, I feel like, he should be with someone that, if he does cheat, that, basically is an investment, that creates an investment, invests in him. You know what I mean? When someone invests in you, and so when that person doesn't invest in you, then you know that they're not in it for you, but they're in it for something else. You know what I mean? Like when I was dating the guy I told you about that was cutting my my pizza, whatever. Yeah, he was cutting my pizza actually. And so I was like, well, first of all, like, who cuts pizza? But okay. But we had a relationship that lasted for a long time. I think it was about maybe 6 or 7 years, right? Off and on. And so, it was, I really had it because I felt like, he wasn't really giving me what I was giving him. You know what I mean? It was kind of like a, you're at my beck and call type of thing. It's like, I have a business trip or whatever in Manhattan. And so, I want you to come there. And, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to have fun and be around Manhattan and do all these things. It's like, no, I have a lunch meeting at noon. Hopefully I can meet you for dinner at such and such and, whatever. Take my credit card and go buy something to wear to dinner. And, it wasn't like, it wasn't to me very, like, heartfelt. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like, like, you're my hoe, type of thing. You know what I mean? And so, when I told him I would leave him, I was like, I'm leaving you or whatnot, and I'm moving away with Lark, and I'm leaving. And so he was like, no. He was like, I'll, pay for Lark or whatever the case to go to school, I think, or something like that. And he was like, I'll give you some money, every month or whatnot to sustain things here with her. And, to get me to stay. And that's when I left, because I said to myself, like, you know, you're not really truly, you like, invested in me. Like, if you were, you would have been giving the money before I said I was going to leave. And now you're like, oh, I'm going to pay for, you know, whatever for you. And so you really just don't love me. You just see me as a slut. You know what I mean? And so that's not what my intentions were. You know, he said he was getting out of his marriage. And at that time, by that time, I was divorced. And so he was still with his wife. And so I said, okay, you know, this isn't going anywhere. You know, you're not investing in me in an emotional sense. And so, you know, I'm like, well, what's the point? Okay. And so, you know, I feel like when it comes to this man, though, I feel like, you know, he can find someone that will invest in him, will invest in him being mentally, physically, and emotionally secure in his marriage. And, you know, people really understand when it comes to, you know, affairs, right? And this kind of ties into Lilith and Libra. When it comes to affairs, affairs are supposed to enhance your marriage. You know, typically when a man has an affair, he's happier when he comes home. The wife is like, wow, you know, why are you so happy? And she enjoys him more. They have better sex, you know what I mean? Like, they have more things to talk about and this, that, and the other, because a lot of what he's doing with the mistress is being transferred onto the partner. And so even when the affair is over, the effects of the affair, the good attributes about it, gets transferred over onto the wife. You see what I'm saying? And so the relationship is better. And so, you know, I feel like, you know, he could have a very fulfilling affair, but, you know, he has to kind of know that, you know, he has this demon, this subconscious demon that's very emotional. And, you know, you have to kind of keep it within a certain level. You know what I mean? Keep his relationships at a certain level where he doesn't totally become enthralled in them, and he just kind of sees it for what it is, which is an escape. And I feel like if he can see it as an escape, then it could be something very fun for him, and very much an outlet that can help him appreciate his marriage and the aspects of his life that are more in tune with the ego as opposed to with the astral body. Okay, so I think that's pretty much, you know, what I want to talk about. You know, if something else comes to me, you know, I might put it in a blog or whatever. So, you know, you guys know when it comes to, you know, doing like channels, like this whole area is worked more. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of sinus issues and stuff like that, you know, as it pertains to, you know, doing my spiritual work. But I feel like Lilith and Libra is very much a placement that I have spiritually that can help him to, you know, help him and his partner to see marriage for what it is, and how in this world, you know, your marriage is bound to fail. I'm sorry, but it is. You can't have a perfect marriage and, you know, expect it not to become stagnant. You know what I mean? You have to, you know, have something put in place and be intentional in order to make sure that your marriage has longevity. Okay? So I want to say that's everything, you know, or whatnot. And so I just hope that, that, you know, he and his partner are very safe and secure, and that if they do get married, if they're not married now, that they have a wonderful, wonderful marriage. Okay? All right, guys, that does it for me, and I will see you in my next video.